Necromancer build, not one, not two, but a lot of different variations for the summoning build and one pure shadow build. So we got a lot to cover, but I'm gonna give you a lot of options of how to play a Necromancer. Let's not waste time, and let's go. So the very first build we're about to cover is a classic summoner Necromancer, or better to say a mix of golems and skeletons. This build is completely retarded, and I reached tier 100 in the pit, and I can easily play Nightmare Dungeons tier 100 with less than 10 hours spent in a game with Necro. I'm speaking about 10 hours from level 1 to level 100 with crappy items, and it's already valid. Stupidly OP. Let's cover it up, then we're gonna cover Golem's build, and then we're gonna cover some strange mixes as well. Let's start from the gear. As helmet goes, you can see the crest here, you don't need it. This is one of the very few builds that doesn't require a single uber unique. But you can also play this build with a lot of uber uniques. If you wanna be tankier, you're gonna use crest and you're gonna use Tyrael's Might. It provides that extra tankiness on a summoner so you don't die as often. If by any case you wanna be even tankier but you're gonna lose some in damage, you're gonna play with a Doombringer, which is gonna enhance your life up by over 36-37% once it's on 12 out of 12. But that's your choice how you want to do it. Basically, again, this build doesn't require a single uber unique to easily play on tier 100. So, what can we use instead of Tyrael's Might? You might wonder. We can use armor like this. Flat life, flat armor, flat intelligence with some imprints for the summons like Skeletal Priest here. For the helmet, you can use whatever you like as long as it has life. Now let's go to gloves. As far as gloves go, I'm using flat gloves with life with Shadow Blight key passive for the aspect. As far as pants go, again, main stat is life. You're gonna get armor where you can, so you kept that armor above 9250, and I'm using Skeletal Warriors and Skeletal Mages number increase for the aspect. As far as boots go, I'm using Skeletal Priest that empowers Skeletal Warriors with life, of course. As far as the weapon goes, I said you can go with a two-hander, and it's even more valid when you play with a two-hander than with offhand and the main weapon, but I just couldn't find a good one in those 10 hours, so I'm using a one-handed weapon with life and with summoning minions passive. As far as offhand goes, we are going with minions gain increased damage over time aspect, as well as life. Basically, you take life whatever you can. As far as amulet goes, we're going with Army of the Dead upgrade. It's extremely good, and there is one more build variation, and that's for the Ebon Piercer. That's completely valid on this build. I'm gonna explain how it works later on. As far as rings go, I'm using increased damage from Shadow Blight key passive and increased shadow damage flat for the imprints. One of completely valid rings to use on this build would be also Sacrilegious Soul, if you have it. And one more extremely valid ring, that's if you use Ebon Piercer. Okay, if you use this one, then you can opt in to play with a Ring of Starless Skies, but then the build slightly changes. Now, what do we do with tempering? Tempering is very simple. You got three options here. The first option is skeletal tempering, the second option is golem tempering, and the third option is something in between with summoning tempering. As you can tell, I didn't spend way too much time with this because I only played 10 hours, and I went with the Creepify, I went with Curse Duration, I went with minion attack, golem's damage, again golem's damage, so my main stat was golem's damage, as well as skeletal mage's damage, as well as ultimate cooldown reduction, because we're gonna use Army of the Dead, yeah. So basically, any tempering that gives minions, golems, the creepify size, and so on is valid on gear. How can you make it perfect? When you focus on a single one. So if you're gonna go with golem's damage, you want to have golem's damage on every single item available. You can also play with a mix, that is your choice how you wanna play it. Again, the build is so freaking retarded that it's probably the most powerful build that exists in a game right now, a summoning Necromancer, especially with a golem. Now, what do we do with expertise, or better to say with a Book of the Dead? For the skeletal warriors, we're gonna take raise additional skeletal warrior. Also, extremely valid would be reapers that can produce a corpse. Your choice how you wanna play. For the skeletal mages, we're using shadow mages that deal increased damage with shadow. If you want to make enemies vulnerable, the valid option would also be cold mages with vulnerable. And for the golems, I'm using Bone Golem with flat damage. Basically, every single golem is valid. If you think that you're dying way too much, you can always go for the Blood Golem to absorb damage. I'm playing with Tyrael's Might, so I can go and opt in for damage. So that depends out of your gear and out of your items. Also, you can play with a Shockwave. That's also valid. And now we come with a skill tree. Why I opted in for Hemorrhage? Because it gives Fortify. And I already have Tyrael's Might, so when I play, I got 50k life with Fortify. That's additional 50k Fortify. So pretty much you don't die at tier 100. That's the idea behind Fortify and Hemorrhage. 1 point into each. As far as core skills go, we're gonna take 1 point into Unliving Energy, 3 points into Imperfectly Balanced, and we're going in for Blight that gives damage to minions with Supernatural Blight. Very simple, you wanna enhance your minions. As far as Corpse and Macabre goes, we're taking Skeletal Warrior's Mastery, 3 points, we take 1 point into Grim Harvest and 3 points into Fuel by Death. Among the curse skills, the most important one would be the Creepify, with Horrid the Creepify that you're gonna spam on enemies non-stop, slow them, and get that free damage reduction. Also, on items where you can, you're gonna take the Creepify size for the tempering. As far as passives go, we're gonna go with 3 points into Death's Embrace and 3 points into Skeletal Mage Mastery, as well as 3 points into Amplify Damage. For the Corpse and Macabre skills down here, we're gonna take a point into Reaper's Pursuit and then 3 points into the rest of the skill tree over here to enhance damage even further. The last one would be the ultimate, where we're gonna take 3 points into Golem, and we're gonna take all available points into this passive skill tree for minions and so on, as well as Army of the Dead, with all points till the end, so we can have that ulti maxed out. That's gonna merge extremely well with Shadow Blight for the key passive. That would be the skill 3. Now how does it change? You remember when I was speaking about Ebon Piercer? That means that your main damage output will be Blight and minions. So you're gonna take some passive points away and you're gonna max out Blight. You only do this if you have the crest. If you play without a crest, then you're gonna stick with this skill 3. If you have a crest, then you're gonna max out Blight for additional damage and apply Ebon Piercer Amulet as well. In case that you don't wanna play with Ebon Piercer, you can play with Sacrilegious Soul. That's also extremely valid and probably the easiest build to play, because you can play with one hand. Okay, you don't need to press a thing when you play with Sacrilegious Soul. You're gonna refresh minions non-stop on your own because of the ring. Now what do we do with a Paragon board for the minions? Mixed minions build. Okay, a bit into warriors, a bit into golem, a bit into your own damage. This is a mixed summoner build. We're taking resilience, we're taking the glyph socket where we're gonna put control, then we're gonna opt in for knowledge, and then for preservation we open up a new Paragon board that would be the cult leader. From the Paragon board cult leader, we're taking the Overlord, we're taking Custody, and inside the Glyph Socket we're gonna put Dead Razor. Then we're gonna move up, get a summon damage from the Puppeteer, then we're gonna take the Cult Leader, and then we're gonna scroll to the left, open up a new Paragon board, and that would be Hulking Monstrosity, or better to say, this is for the Golem. Over here, we're going straight to the left, we're taking Miscreation, we're taking Mutation, and inside the Glyph Socket, we're putting Golem's damage. Down here we're gonna take additional Golem's damage with Frenzied Golem, then we're gonna take Borrow Strength, then we're gonna take Flesh Horror, we're gonna take Infused Golem, and we're gonna open up 2 different routes for 2 extra Paragon boards. We're gonna go to the left over here, straight into the Flesh Eater for additional damage. Over here, we're taking Targeted, we're taking Erudite, and on a Glyph Socket, we're gonna take Warrior Glyph Socket, as well as Flesh Eater Legendary Node. Now we're going back, and when we open the other Paragon board, we're gonna take Wither. Wither for that shadow damage, especially if you plan to play with Ebon Piercer. From here, we're going all the way to the right, to the Glyph Socket, where we're gonna put Scourge. From Scourge, we're taking Malediction, we're taking Gloom, we're taking Lingering Shadows, we're going all the way up, take Restorative, get a Wither Legendary Node, we're going up, we open the last Paragon board, that would be Scent of Death, we're taking the Glyph Socket with Mage Glyph, and we're going left and right to the Death Marked and Preservation. That's one of the many options that you have for the summoning build. A lot of nodes are valid. Darkness, Desecration, Abyssal, all of those glyphs are valid. Test it out, see what suits you the best. I'm playing with this when I play a summoner. There's easily 15 different glyphs that you can use on this build, and they're all equally valid because the build is completely broken. Why is the build broken? The build is extremely broken because of Elixir of Holy Bolts. You can call it a bug, you can call it a Blizzard's mistake, you can call it however you like, it doesn't really matter. As long as you spam Raise Skeleton on corpses, you're gonna trigger stupid Holy Bolts. And you're gonna one-shot everything on the screen, and your minions will also kill, and they'll also trigger Holy Bolts, and there's gonna be a lot of Holy Bolts on the screen, and everything will die. As long as you remain safe. How you remain safe? By being tanky, with a lot of life, and with a lot of damage reduction. That's the entire trick of the build. No matter if you opt in for full Golem's build on your gear, or for full Skeletal build, or a mix of a shadow build with minions, with Omen Piercer, and so on. It really doesn't matter. What matters is this stupid potion on a build. That's what makes the build very powerful. When you're also very powerful against the bosses, hilarious damage from Holy Bolts and Army of the Dead combo. you can easily burst out the boss on tier 100 in like 15 seconds. I personally believe that this build will be drastically nerfed, especially for the next season, but right now it's pretty much the most OP build in the game. Your choice how you want to play it. Again, most important thing, it's better to play with a two-hander than with a classic sword or a wand with the offhand. I didn't find a good one, but you will if you play longer than 10 hours. Now let's transfer to other variation without minions. Now we're gonna check out a flat shadow damage, or better to say darkness necromancer. So here we are at darkness necromancer, wither necromancer, flat blight damage necromancer build. What is the main point of the build? The main point of the build is of course blight that merges extremely well with Ebon Piercer. Not a single minion here, you just play on your own. What is the best thing about this build? It's very fun to play, it requires a lot of skill and a lot of positioning. And you actually press a lot of buttons while playing, compared to the minions build where you can basically play blindfolded. This is also a slightly weaker build than broken minions, but that's because of the holy bolts, okay, because of the elixir. In all other seasons, 99% Blight Necro will be more powerful than any other summoning Necro. Again, the entire difference is the potion and the bugged out thing where you get to pop the potion on corpses non-stop. You won't be able to do it with Blight, but you will deal a lot of damage over time. And damage over time is the main stat on Blight Necro build. For me personally, this took less than 3 hours to assemble, so items are very basic. I tested it out, I finished Nightmare Dungeon tier 100, and it was extremely easy and extremely smooth, so I can imagine with correct items. Now what are the correct items? Instead of a two-handed sword, you want a two-handed skit with damage over time. And damage over time is actually the stat that you want to have on every single item, as tempering as well as in the main stats. Okay, if you can get it with a star, the better. I tested this build out with wrong gloves, with wrong tempering, okay, only with good aspects, and it's very OP, so I can imagine what's gonna happen once I assemble the full build. Right now it really works well, and as I said, primary stat would be damage over time. Second stat would be shadow damage, darkness damage, wherever you can get it, whether on Paragon Board or on gear. And the third, most important, would be life. So those would be 3 primary stats. You don't pay attention to attack power at all, because you deal damage over time and it really doesn't matter. Crit doesn't matter, nothing matters, only damage over time for your Blight. Now, how I created this build? I created this build revolving around curses. Okay, I know it's out of meta, but it works. It really works. So, what are we using? We're cursing enemies with Iron Maiden, that's transferred to Shadow, to Darkness damage. We're cursing enemies with the Creepify, then we assemble them all with Corpse Tendrils, make them vulnerable, and then we whack them with Blight. I also play with Hemorrhage, because I can fortify and make this Necromancer slightly tankier. So, we got Fortify, we got AoE damage, we got bunch of crowd control effects, and at the end we got immunity with Blood Mist. What are the items? In case what I said about summoning Necromancer, whether it's golems or skeletons or whatever, I said how crest is not important. If you wanna play Blight, crest is a must. What's also very good to have, on Blight Necromancer would be the Ring of the Starless Skies, of course. That's one extremely good ring, because you're gonna use core skills, and core skill is Blight, and your main damage output is Blight. Yeah, it's not necessary, but it's solid to have. So those two would be great. Also, if you can get Ethereal Smite, the better, you're gonna be tankier. Yeah, slightly less damage in return though, but it is damage over time, so there's nothing to worry about. All depends out of your main weapon, whether you're gonna find a two-hander with damage over time and get the tempering for damage over time or not. So once you have a good weapon, you can switch to Tyrael's Might as well. Now, what are the aspects? In the armor, we're gonna take Iron Maiden Turns to Darkness, because we're gonna use Iron Maiden a lot. Then for the gloves, we use Shadow Blight Key on 10 seconds. Then on pens, we're gonna use Blight that defiles the area, because we play with Blight, yeah. Then we're gonna take Daze, 20% more damage on boots for the aspect. On the main weapon, we're taking Shadow Blight Key passive damage up to 200, and I think it goes to 40%. For Amulet, it's very simple. This is like the main, most mandatory item for the build, Ebon Piercer. For rings, again, tempering damage over time with aspects, shadow damage increase flat, and shadow damage over time effects. Those would be the aspects. Very simple build to play. As I said, I only played this. I assembled this in like less than 3 hours. It can be like 10 times better than it is right now, and it's mega easy to do Nightmare Dungeons tier 100. Even with this build. This is without Masterworks on most of the gear. Now, let's check what are we doing with the Book of the Dead. We're gonna sacrifice Reapers, we're gonna sacrifice Cold Skeletal Mages, and we're gonna sacrifice Iron Golem. That's about it. We take shadow damage, a bit of tankiness, a bit of crits, and of story. For the skill tree, we're taking Hemorrhage and Initiates Hemorrhage. For the Fortify, we wanna be tanky. For the core skill, of course, it's Blight. We max Blight out and we take Supernatural Blight. Here, for the passives, 1 point into Energy, 3 points into Imperfectly Balanced. And that's it with this part. Now, transfer down to Macabre skills, we're taking Blood Mist and we're gonna take Critical Chance after Blood Mist ends. After that, we're taking Grim Harvest, 1 point, 3 points into Fueled by Death. Now we transfer down, and Curses would be the main thing of this build, where we're gonna take both Iron Maiden and Decrepify with Abhorrent Decrepify and Horrid Iron Maiden. This is a must. Of course, passives, that's Embrace and Amplify damage, 3 points each. Now we're gonna go down, we're gonna take Corpse Tendrils, and we're gonna take Vulnerable on Plagued Corpse Tendrils. That's about it here. We take all the available points as far as shadow damage goes over here with Corpse and Macabre skills. We're transferring down where the ultimates are. We're gonna take Inspiring Leader, 3 points, 3 points into Standalone, and 3 points into Memento Mori, and we finish everything up with Shadow Blight Key passive. That's about it, very simple. Now for the Paragon board, so we're going to Prime, we're going to Resilience, we take a Glyph Socket, we put Essence inside the Glyph Socket. We take Knowledge, we move on, we open up a new Paragon board, and it would be the main Paragon board. It's Wither. Everything that you do with this build revolves around Wither. And we're gonna take every single yellow node as well as blue nodes that enhance shadow damage and shadow damage over time. So we're taking the entire board basically, like you see it over here, as well as legendary node, and inside the glyph we're gonna put Abyssal. Now from this side we're gonna go up and we're gonna go to the left. First we're gonna go to the left, we're gonna take Scent of Death legendary node, and here we're taking Control glyph. Of course we're taking Death Marked, we're taking Preservation, we're taking Corrective, we're gonna take Shadow Resilience, as well as Ruin, as well as Deathbringer. Now once we're done with the two main Paragon boards, that would be Scent of Death and Wither, we're going up and we're taking the Flesh Eater Paragon board, where we're gonna opt in immediately for it. We're gonna pass through Stifle. Then we're going up, taking up the Glyph Socket, where we're gonna put Scourge, we're taking Erudite, we're taking Targeted, we're moving all the way up. And up here, as you can tell, lesser amount of Paragon boards, because it's not needed, Wither is the most important. We're gonna take Bloodbath. On a Bloodbath, we're gonna take Hardened and we're gonna take a Remedy. And inside the Glyph Socket, we're taking Darkness. So if you plan to open up a 6th Paragon board with a 6th Glyph, it should be Desecration, but you're gonna need to play with Desecrated Ground. So there are aspects, 2 aspects for Desecrated Ground, and you'll need to check them out. If you wanna do it, you're gonna need to take away some of the skills, for example Blood Mist, and you go with ulti that generates Desecrated Ground, you ramp up the 6th board, you put Desecration. I'm still to test it because I believe it's gonna merge extremely well over here. I guess it's for pushing tier in the pet 110 and above. And then on top of this, we're gonna remove some of the points from the Scent of Death. So basically these that you see over here. So we're removing Shadow Resilience all the way up to the Legendary node, as well as this. That's enough Paragon points to apply Desecration Glyph on the 6th board, and you can check it out and see how it works like that as well. But again, you need to switch the build. So there are 2 options how you can play Blight Necromancer. To put it short, I gave you the options for the Golem Minions build, for the Mix build, for the Shadow Minions build, and for the Flat Shadow, or should I say Flat Blight build. 4 or 5 different builds in one video, and I explained you what to change for what and what to go for. Mandatory for Necromancer as well as for any other class would be Life. For the Shadow Mage it would be damage over time and Shadow damage. For Minions it would be Golem, because it scales the best out of all minions that you have. It only took me 10 hours to reach Pit tier 100 as well as Nightmare Dungeons tier 100 with a Necromancer. That's how OP Necromancer is right now, and it's probably the best class and the easiest class to play in a game. My personal choice would be Blight, because it takes more buttons pressing than the actual minions. I find minions very boring and very repetitive, but it's your choice how you wanna play. No matter what you pick, Necromancer is probably the best class during this season. As always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I'll be seeing you on the next one. Thanks for watching.